This is my true story. I raised my daughter with everything I had. Her mother died young, so I worked day and night to make sure she had a good life. I washed dishes, carried bricks, went hungry so she could study and eat well. When she married into wealth, I thought she'd finally have the happiness I dreamed for her. But years later, I stood in her mansion, not as her father, but as her servant. You won't believe what happened next. Before I tell you, tell me where you're watching from, and please subscribe so my story can reach more hearts. When she married, everything changed. She didn't even look back when she left home. The girl who once hugged me tight and promised to take care of me one day was gone. Her new husband came from money, rich family, big house, fancy cars. I was proud at first. I thought she had finally found stability, that she would never struggle like I did. But soon, her visits stopped. The phone calls became fewer, then disappeared completely. I'd wait by the small window of my old house every evening, hoping she might call, hoping to hear her voice. But weeks turned into months, and months into years. Nothing. I tried visiting her once. I wore my cleanest clothes, the same shirt I wore to her wedding, even though it was old and faded now. When I arrived, the security guard at the gate looked me up and down and said, "Sir, no servants allowed." I told him I was her father. He laughed like it was a joke. I stood there for a long time trying to find the courage to call her name, but my voice refused to come out. I walked back home that night, slow and tired, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. She changed her last name after the wedding, started speaking differently, started acting like she was born rich. A neighbor once showed me a photo of her from a magazine, standing beside her husband, smiling, wearing expensive clothes, her hair tied perfectly. She looked happy, but not the kind of happiness that comes from love. It was pride. It was distance. She had built a new world where I didn't exist. I wasn't her father anymore. I was a memory she had erased. Sometimes I'd see her on TV, attending charity events, talking about helping the poor. I'd laugh quietly to myself, not out of anger, but out of sadness. I was the poor she had forgotten. I was the man who once slept hungry so she could have bread. I was the reason she stood on that stage, but she didn't even know I was still alive. That thought haunted me every night. I tried writing letters to her, but I never sent them. What could I say? "Hello, this is your father. Do you still remember me?" The words felt heavy and useless. I tore them up every time. Pride is a strange thing. Even in pain, it stops you from reaching out. I didn't want to beg for her attention. I just wanted to be remembered. Years passed. My body grew weaker, my hair turned white, and my small house began to fall apart. I sold most of what I had just to survive. But even when I had nothing left, I never stopped thinking about her. Every birthday, I'd light a candle and whisper a prayer for her. Every night, I'd look at her old photographs, her first day of school, her graduation, her wedding, and wonder if she ever thought of me. Then one day, I overheard someone at the market talking about a big mansion being built near the hill. They said it belonged to a powerful businessman, my daughter's husband. My heart stopped for a second. After all those years, she was living so close again. I didn't know whether to smile or cry. It felt like fate was playing with me, placing her so near but still so far. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her. Did she have children now? Did she still laugh the same way she used to as a little girl? Did she ever sit by her window and think of me? I knew she probably didn't. Still, something inside me refused to let go. A father's heart doesn't stop caring, even when it's been forgotten. That was when I made the decision, one that would change everything. If she wouldn't let me in as her father, maybe I could find another way to be near her. Maybe I could just see her again, even from a distance. I told myself I didn't need her love, only her presence. But deep down, I think I was lying to myself. It took me several weeks to gather the courage. I was an old man now, tired, thin, worn down by years of hard work and loneliness. I had nothing left, no savings, no family, no home that felt alive anymore. The only thing that still beat inside me was the wish to see my daughter again, even if she didn't want me. So, when I heard that her mansion was hiring staff, Housekeepers, cleaners, gardeners. I saw it as a sign. Maybe God was giving me one last chance to be close to her, even if she didn't know who I was. I went to the gate early one morning, dressed in my old shirt and trousers, carrying a small bag. The security guard looked at me with suspicion, but I showed him the notice about the job. He told me to wait. After some time, the house manager came out, a young woman, strict and busy. She asked a few questions, not about my life, just about my work. "Can you clean? Can you cook simple food? Can you take orders?" I said yes to everything. She didn't ask for my name at first, but when she did, I paused. I couldn't say my real name. If my daughter heard it, she would know. So I gave her another one, a name I made up on the spot. That's how I became someone else. She hired me that same day, said they needed someone to help with cleaning and serving in the kitchen. I followed her through the long driveway, my legs shaking, my heart pounding like a drum. When I stepped inside the house for the first time, my breath caught. Everything was shining. Marble floors, tall chandeliers, big paintings, expensive furniture. I looked around and thought, so this is where my daughter lives now. I wanted to feel proud, but all I felt was distance. Then I saw her. She walked down the staircase like a stranger. Her hair was tied neatly, her clothes were elegant, her steps confident. She looked so grown, so far from the little girl who once held my hand at the market, begging for sweets. My throat tightened, and for a moment, I almost said her name. But I stopped myself. She looked right at me, and then looked away. Just like that. No flicker of recognition, no emotion, no memory. To her, I was just another servant standing quietly in the corner. From that day forward, I began working in her house. I swept floors she walked on. I polished tables where she ate. I washed the dishes her hands never touched. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise, cleaned the garden, wiped windows, and made sure everything was perfect. I did it not for money, but for her. Just being near her, hearing her voice, seeing her pass by, it was enough to make my tired heart keep beating. I kept my distance, always careful not to be noticed too much. I listened when she spoke to others, about business meetings, dinners, parties. Her tone was sharp, commanding, proud. I could tell she had learned how to survive in the world of wealth, but she had forgotten warmth. Sometimes, when she laughed with her husband or her friends, I'd stop and just listen, trying to find a trace of the daughter I once knew in that sound. But she was gone. Every night, when work was done, I'd return to the servant quarters, a small dark room at the back of the house. I had a thin mattress, a small fan, and one old photo of her I kept hidden in my bag. I would take it out quietly, look at it under the dim light, and whisper, "You look happy, my child." I wanted to tell her everything, how proud I still was, how much I missed her, how I forgave her even for forgetting me. But I couldn't. I was trapped in my own lie, a servant living in his daughter's house. There were moments I almost slipped. Once she dropped her scarf and I picked it up. When I handed it to her, she smiled faintly and said, "Thank you." Just that small word made my eyes wet. It had been years since she had spoken to me, even unknowingly. I had to turn away quickly before she saw the tears. Working there was both heaven and hell. Heaven because I got to see her every day. Hell because she didn't know who I was. But I told myself it was enough, that seeing her alive and safe was worth any pain. I thought I could live the rest of my life like that, quietly, unseen, just watching her from the shadows. I didn't know then that the truth would one day reveal itself in the cruelest way possible. My days in that house were long, quiet, and heavy. Every morning before the sun rose, I would wake up to the sound of the kitchen bell. My body ached, my hands were rough and swollen, but I never complained. I would clean the floors, scrub the marble steps, polish the mirrors until I could see my face, old, tired, unfamiliar. Then I'd move to the dining hall, arranging everything exactly the way she liked it. She was strict about order. Every cup, every napkin, every flower had to be perfect. I knew her habits better than anyone, yet she didn't know who I was. That thought stung every day, like a wound that never healed. When she walked past, I would lower my head. I didn't want her to look too closely at me, afraid she might notice something familiar. But she never did. She walked by like I was invisible, her perfume filling the air, her voice sharp and confident. She spoke to me the same way she spoke to all the servants, short, commanding, cold. Clean faster. Be quiet. Don't stand there. I obeyed every word. Not because I was afraid, but because I loved her too much to let pride speak. Every time she spoke, I heard the echo of the little girl she used to be, the one who called me Papa, the one who ran to me after school with her report card. I missed that voice. I missed her more than I could ever say. At breakfast, I would serve her tea and stand at the corner of the room, waiting quietly. Sometimes her husband would glance at me, then look away like I was part of the furniture. They lived in another world, a world of meetings, guests, and wealth. I was just an old man in uniform, moving through the house unnoticed. But to me, every moment near her was a gift. I would watch her eat, smile, talk, laugh, and I would think, she's safe. That's enough. The other servants treated me with little respect. They called me the old one behind my back, laughed when I worked too slowly, mocked my silence. But I didn't care. None of it mattered as long as I could stay there. I cleaned her clothes, ironed her sheets, and sometimes, when I folded her dresses, I would touch the fabric gently, remembering the small hands that once held mine when I took her to school. The memory made my chest tighten every time. She was demanding with everyone. Once, she scolded a young maid for spilling a drink. The girl ran out crying. I wanted to say something, to remind her of kindness, but I stayed quiet. It wasn't my place. Not anymore. I had no right to speak as her father. I was only the servant now, the one who bowed, apologized, and obeyed. At night, when the house was quiet, I'd sit alone outside near the back gate. The stars above reminded me of the nights I spent working double shifts to buy her books, to pay for her school, to make sure she had a future. I'd think about her mother, about how she used to say, "She will be your pride one day." And she was, even if she didn't remember me. Pride doesn't disappear, even when love is forgotten. One afternoon, I caught her watching me for a brief second. It was strange. I was cleaning the hallway, and when I looked up, her eyes met mine. For a moment, I thought I saw confusion, maybe a hint of recognition. But then, just as quickly, it vanished. She turned away and walked off, calling for someone else. My heart raced the rest of the day, wondering if she had seen something familiar in me. But the next morning, everything was the same. She passed me again without a word, and I realized she hadn't seen me at all. Every day became a test of patience and pain. I lived in the shadow of my own child, serving her meals, cleaning her floor, and listening to her voice give orders like I was nothing. But I couldn't hate her. No father can hate his child, not even when they forget him. I told myself that my silence was love, that this was the price of being near her again. But deep down, I knew I was breaking slowly, piece by piece. Still, I kept working. I told myself one lie every morning, that one day she might look at me and remember, that maybe her heart, somewhere under all the pride and distance, still carried a small piece of the love she once had for her father. Pain became a part of my days in that house, like air I couldn't stop breathing. It wasn't the kind of pain that comes from work or age. It was the kind that lives deep inside, quiet and sharp, like a knife twisting slowly. I had worked hard all my life, but I had never felt humiliation like this. Every time she spoke to me like I was nothing, every time she looked through me like I didn't exist, I felt something inside me crumble. I wanted to remind her who I was, to scream, "I am your father." But I couldn't. My voice had no place in her world. She treated me like the rest of the servants, maybe worse. She was impatient with me because I was old, slower, less useful. "You missed a spot," she'd say. "Can't you move faster?" Her words were knives, and I let them cut me because I loved the hand that held them. Once, when I served tea and accidentally spilled a few drops on the table, she threw the cup down, her voice sharp and cold. "You people are all the same," she said. "Slow, clumsy, useless." The cup shattered at my feet. I bent down quietly, picking up the pieces one by one, my hands shaking, the hot tea burning my skin. She turned away without another glance. That moment broke something in me. I had been insulted before, by strangers, by employers, by life itself. But being humiliated by the daughter I raised with my own hands, that was a pain I couldn't describe. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. My heart wouldn't let me. I couldn't walk away from her, even if it meant walking over my own pride. That night, in my small room behind the kitchen, I couldn't sleep. My back hurt, my hands were bleeding from work, but that wasn't what kept me awake. I kept seeing her face, the same face that used to light up when I came home from work, the same face that once kissed my cheek and said, "I love you, Papa." Where did that little girl go? How could the same heart that once held my hand so tightly now treat me like a stranger? Sometimes the other servants would whisper when she scolded me. They thought I couldn't hear, but I did. "The old man should retire," one of them said. "He's too weak for this work." I wanted to tell them that once, I wasn't weak. Once, I was the man who carried his daughter on his shoulders, who built her dreams out of sweat and sacrifice. But in that house, those memories meant nothing. I was just another tired worker. There were days she'd make jokes with her friends while I served food. They'd laugh loudly, not noticing my trembling hands. Once, one of them said, "You have too many old people working here." And she laughed. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, laughed. I stood there staring at the tablecloth, pretending not to hear. But inside I felt something die a little more. In the evenings, when the house grew quiet, I would sit by the window in the servant quarters, staring at the big garden outside. The same garden where she sometimes walked with her guests, her head held high, her voice full of confidence. I used to dream of walking beside her like a father again. But dreams fade when they're built on pain. I started to avoid her as much as I could. I'd take the long route through the back hallways, keep my head down, move silently, like a shadow. Not because I feared her, but because every glance from her reminded me of what I had lost. It was easier to stay unseen, easier to pretend I was just a worker who happened to look too much like her father. But no matter how much I tried to stay away, fate had its own plans. There are things a man can hide, his name, his past, his voice, but not love, and mine was written all over my silence. Every time I saw her, I prayed for one small thing, that one day she'd look at me long enough to see not a servant, but a father. I didn't know then that the day that prayer came true, it would destroy us both. At night, when the house went quiet and everyone had gone to sleep, I would sit on the edge of my small bed, my back aching, my hands raw, staring at the one photograph I still carried with me, her school picture. She was wearing her old blue uniform, her hair tied with ribbons, smiling at the camera with both her hands holding mine. I looked young in that photo, strong, full of life and hope. Every time I looked at it, I felt something warm rise in my chest and then turn to pain. That little girl in the photo, she was the only reason I kept breathing. But the woman she became, she wouldn't even recognize the man sitting in that photo beside her. I kept that picture hidden under my pillow. Every night before sleeping, I'd take it out, clean the dust from it, and whisper a small prayer. I'd tell her mother, who was long gone, that I had found our daughter again, that she lived well, safe, and strong. But I never told her the truth, that I was living in the same house, unseen, treated like dirt by the child we once raised together. I couldn't say those words, not even to the dead. They hurt too much to admit. Some nights, I'd close my eyes and remember her childhood, the sound of her laughter as she ran through the fields, calling me to chase her. The way she used to wait at the window for me to come home from work, running into my arms as soon as she saw me. The smell of her hair when she fell asleep on my lap after dinner. Those memories played in my head like old music, sweet and painful at the same time. I'd open my eyes then and look around my cold, tiny room. No warmth, no light, no family. Just silence and loneliness. There was one memory that never left me. It was from the night of the fire, the one that left the deep scar on my hand. She was just 7 years old. I remember waking up to her screams, the house filling with smoke. I ran through the flames without thinking, grabbed her from her bed and carried her outside. A burning beam fell, and I shielded her with my body. The pain was unbearable, but I didn't care. She was safe. That scar stayed with me for life, a reminder of what love looks like when it burns. I used to show her that scar when she was little, and she'd always kiss it, saying, "My brave papa." But now, she couldn't even look at my face long enough to remember. Sometimes, during the day, I'd catch her humming the same old tune her mother used to sing. It made my chest tighten. I wondered if she ever realized where that melody came from. From the woman who once sang her to sleep, the same woman whose photo I kept folded in my pocket. She never talked about her mother. Maybe it hurt too much, or maybe she had buried that part of her life completely. I wanted to remind her, but I couldn't. My words didn't belong in her world anymore. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, thinking about how far she had gone from the life we shared. The distance between us wasn't measured in miles, but in pride. Pride had built a wall so high that even love couldn't climb it. Still, I kept hoping, foolishly, that maybe one day something would break through. That one day she'd look at me long enough to remember the scar on my hand, the sound of my voice, the face of the man who once carried her through fire. I started dreaming of her often. In my dreams, she was little again, running toward me, calling Papa in that small, joyful voice. I'd wake up smiling, only to remember where I really was, her servant, living in the house I never thought I'd enter this way. Every morning, I'd fold the photograph back into my pocket, take a deep breath, and go back to cleaning, cooking, serving. The weight of that secret grew heavier each day. But love has its own way of revealing itself, no matter how hard you hide it. I didn't know when or how, but deep inside I felt it. The truth would come out. The past has a way of finding its way back home, even if it has to crawl through pain to do it. It happened on a Friday evening. The house was full of guests, music playing, laughter echoing through every room. Her husband had invited business partners for dinner, and she was busy entertaining them, walking around with her usual grace and confidence. I was in the dining hall, helping to serve. My hands were trembling from exhaustion. I hadn't eaten properly in days, and the work never stopped. Still, I wanted everything to be perfect. For her. Always for her. Even if she didn't know it, I wanted her guests to be proud of her. I thought that was still something I could give her, even from the shadows. The air was warm that night. The chandeliers above glowed bright, the smell of expensive food filled the air, and the guests laughed too loudly. I stood in the corner, waiting for my cue to serve. My back hurt, my knees shook, but I kept going. When it was time to bring in the tea, I carried the tray carefully. 1 cup for each guest, perfectly arranged. The tray felt heavier than usual, maybe because my hands had grown weaker. As I reached the table, someone bumped into me. The tray tilted, the cups rattled, and before I could steady it, one of them fell. Hot tea spilled across the table, dripping onto the floor. The sound of that cup shattering was louder than anything in that moment. The room went silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. I froze. My hands shook even more, my heart pounding in my chest. I bent down quickly to clean the mess, my knees pressing into the hard floor. Before I could say a word, I felt her presence. I didn't have to look up. I could feel it, the silence that always came before her anger. She stood there, her face tight with rage, her voice cold and sharp. "Don't touch me, you filthy old man," she snapped. The words hit harder than any slap could. Her guests stared, some pretending to laugh it off, others whispering. My body went still. My eyes blurred with tears I couldn't stop. I wanted to explain, to say it was an accident, but the words wouldn't come. I had been silent for too long. My voice no longer knew how to speak. I bent down again, picking up the broken pieces of the cup with my bare hands. The sharp edges cut into my skin, small drops of blood mixing with the spilled tea. But I didn't stop. I just kept cleaning. That's what servants do. We clean our own pain quietly, so no one else has to see it. She didn't move to help. She didn't even look sorry. She just turned away and told one of the maids to bring another cup. My hands trembled as I gathered the last piece, and I felt something inside me collapse. Not from her words, but from the realization that the girl I once saved from fire now burned me in silence. The pain in my hand grew worse, but I didn't care. I stayed there on my knees, pretending it didn't hurt, pretending her words didn't break me. Her guests started talking again, pretending nothing had happened. That's what rich people do. They ignore the suffering of those beneath them. I was invisible again, just like always. I got up slowly, holding the pieces tightly, feeling the blood trickle between my fingers. I wanted to hide, to disappear before she could say anything else that would destroy what was left of me. As I turned to leave the room, something made me stop. I caught sight of her reflection in the glass door. Her face, pale and tense, her eyes darting toward me for a brief second. There was something there, something unsure, like a flicker of confusion, but it passed quickly. She looked away, adjusting her dress, forcing a smile for her guests. I walked away quietly, my head low, my heart heavy. In the kitchen, I washed my hands. The cuts stung, the blood running thin with water. When I looked down, I saw it. The old scar on my right hand, the one I got years ago when I pulled her out of the burning house. The scar she used to touch when she was little. The scar she said made me her hero. I stared at it for a long time, my breath shaking. I didn't know it then, but that same scar, the one that saved her once, was about to reveal the truth I'd been hiding for so long. When I walked back into the dining room, my hands still red from the cuts, I could feel every heartbeat echoing in my chest. I tried to stay quiet, to blend back into the shadows where I belonged, but fate doesn't let some truths stay buried forever. As I bent down to collect the last broken piece from the floor, the sleeve of my shirt slipped up, exposing my right hand, the one with the long, twisted scar. The guests were too busy laughing again to notice, but she did. My daughter. The woman who had just called me filthy. Her eyes froze. Her laughter stopped mid-sound. I didn't look up at first, but I could feel her stare burning into me. I could almost hear her breathing change, quick, uneven, confused. That scar wasn't something anyone could forget. She had seen it every day when she was a little girl, tracing her tiny fingers over it while sitting on my lap. She used to ask, "Does it hurt, Papa?" And I would always smile and say, "Not anymore, because you're safe." That memory was buried deep in her heart, but in that moment, it came back like lightning. The color drained from her face. Her hand trembled as she lifted it to her mouth. Her guests were still talking, unaware of the storm inside her, but she couldn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on me as I bent down again, trying to hide the scar, but it was too late. She saw it. She knew. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She just whispered something so soft I almost didn't hear it. My name. My real name. Not old man. Not servant. My name. I froze. My whole body went numb. Slowly, I lifted my head, and for the first time in years, our eyes met. Father and daughter. The noise around us disappeared. The air felt heavy, thick with silence. She was trembling now, her eyes wide, her mouth open like she couldn't breathe. The guests looked confused, whispering, wondering what was happening. I saw her lips move again, one small word breaking the silence. "Dad?" Everything stopped. The sound of forks, glasses, laughter, all gone. You could have heard a pin drop. I stood there, holding the tray, staring at her, not sure if I should answer. My throat tightened, my eyes filled, but no words came out. I didn't need to speak. My silence said everything. The way my eyes looked at her, the way her face changed from pride to horror. It was enough. She took a small step toward me, but then stopped, her hand trembling in midair. I could see her eyes filling with tears, her lips shaking. Her guests looked between us, whispering, but she didn't care. She couldn't look away from me. She stared at the scar again, her voice breaking as she whispered, "It's you." I wanted to reach out, to hold her, to tell her it was okay, that I didn't blame her, that I never stopped loving her. But my legs wouldn't move. My hands were shaking too much. All I could do was stand there, watching her world collapse in front of everyone. The proud woman who had once pushed me aside now stood frozen, realizing the man she had humiliated, the man she had called filthy, was the same man who had once saved her life. One of her guests asked what was wrong, but she couldn't answer. She just turned toward me, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said, but I couldn't reply. The truth was too heavy. I had lived in her house for months, cleaning her floors, washing her dishes, bowing when she passed, all just to see her again. How could I explain that kind of love? How could I tell her that a father's heart doesn't die, even when it's been forgotten? I lowered my head again, not out of shame, but because I couldn't bear the sight of her tears. She rushed forward suddenly, reaching for my hand, the same hand with the scar. Her fingers brushed against it, trembling. The touch made my heart twist. For a moment, I saw the little girl again, the one who once kissed that scar. But the moment didn't last. Her husband's voice broke through the silence, confused and angry, asking what was happening. She didn't answer. She just looked at him, then back at me, and whispered again, "This is my father." Gasps filled the room. The truth was out. The servant everyone ignored was the owner of her childhood, the man she once called Papa. I saw shock, pity, even disgust on some faces. But I didn't care. I had seen her see me. Truly see me. And for the first time in years, that was enough. When she said that word, "Father," the entire house seemed to stop breathing. Her guests froze in their seats. Even the servants in the corner dropped what they were doing and turned to look. For a few seconds, I couldn't hear or move. Everything around me blurred, like the world had gone silent except for her trembling voice. My daughter stood there, pale as ash, her hand still hovering near me, her eyes filled with disbelief and guilt. And me, I stood with my back bent, my hands shaking, my heart caught between love and pain. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never like this. She started walking toward me, slowly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Each step sounded louder than the last. I saw her face up close now. The same eyes, the same nose, the same mouth that once called me Papa. She was still my little girl, no matter how much time or pride had changed her. Her tears began to fall, and I couldn't stop mine either. She reached out again, whispering my name like she couldn't believe it. My heart screamed to hold her, to tell her I was still here, that I had never stopped loving her, but my body wouldn't move. I just stood there, frozen in my pain. Her husband's voice broke through the air, sharp and angry, asking what kind of joke this was. But she didn't answer him. She couldn't. She was too lost in the truth that had finally caught up to her. "This is my father," she said again, louder this time, her voice cracking. Her guests looked at each other, uncomfortable, whispering under their breath. I saw judgment in their eyes, not for me, but for her. In their world, shame came fast and deep. She turned to me again, her face breaking, her voice shaking. "You worked here? All this time?" I nodded slowly. My lips trembled, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing. She covered her mouth with her hand and started to cry. "I didn't know," she whispered, almost to herself. But I had known that long ago. I knew she didn't know. That's what made it hurt more. The truth that a child could forget her own father so completely that he could live under her roof and still be a stranger. The guests began leaving quietly, one by one, pretending not to stare. Her husband stood there, stiff, embarrassed, not saying a word. The house grew quiet again, except for her sobs. She knelt down in front of me, the same way I had once knelt in front of her when she was a child. The image cut deep, the rich woman who once commanded everyone around her now sitting on the floor, crying at the feet of the servant she had insulted. I wanted to tell her to stop crying, that it was all right, that fathers forgive easily. But I couldn't. My body felt heavy, my heart too full. She took my hand in hers, and when her fingers touched the scar, she broke down completely. Her tears fell on my skin, mixing with the blood still there from the broken cup. I closed my eyes. I could feel her trembling. "I'm sorry," she kept saying, over and over. I wanted to tell her that I forgave her long ago, that love doesn't die even when it's forgotten. But the words wouldn't come. They were buried under years of silence and pain. The other servants were watching from the doorway, whispering to each other. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. She saw me, not as a worker, not as an old man, but as her father. That look in her eyes, pain, guilt, love, and realization. It was everything I had prayed for, and yet it tore me apart. I didn't know whether to feel joy or sorrow. I slowly lifted my hand, placed it on her head the way I used to when she was small, and whispered softly, "It's all right, my child." My voice cracked as I said it. The words felt like they carried all the weight of the years I had lost. She cried harder then, clutching my hand against her face. The people who once looked down on me now looked away, unable to watch what love and shame look like when they finally meet. I stood there for a while, my hand still on her head, my heart beating heavy. This was the moment I had dreamed of, being recognized, being remembered. But it didn't feel the way I thought it would. It didn't bring peace. It only brought a deeper pain, the kind that comes when truth arrives too late. I knew, deep inside, that things could never be the same again. After that night, I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Everything inside those walls had changed. The air felt heavy, the silence louder than before. Every step I took echoed with memories I didn't want to carry anymore. My daughter tried to speak to me, to explain, to make sense of what she had done, but I couldn't look at her the same way. Not because I hated her, I could never hate her, but because I finally understood how deeply love can hurt when pride destroys it. I had lived under her roof as a servant, obeying her, bowing to her, while she spoke to me like I was nothing. Now that she knew the truth, every glance from her was filled with guilt, and I couldn't bear it. The morning after the dinner, she came to the servants' quarters. I was sitting on the bed, folding my few clothes, preparing to leave. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair messy, her voice quiet. She tried to stop me, to beg me to stay. I didn't say anything. I just kept folding, one shirt after another, slowly, because my hands were shaking. I could feel her standing there, crying softly, whispering my name, asking me to forgive her. But forgiveness isn't something you speak. It's something you carry. I had already forgiven her long ago, long before she even realized what she had done. But I couldn't live there anymore, not as her servant, not even as her father. That house had seen too much pain. When I stood up to leave, she fell to her knees and held onto my legs, begging me not to go. The same woman who once threw orders at me was now clinging to me like a child. It broke my heart. I wanted to pull her up, hold her close, tell her it was fine, that everything was okay. But it wasn't. The wound was too deep, the years too long. I looked down at her and said quietly, "You taught me my place, and now I know it." My voice cracked as I said it. She cried harder, shaking, her tears falling on my shoes. I wanted to stay, but I knew that if I did, the pain would never heal for either of us. I walked past her slowly, my small bag in my hand, my steps unsteady. Every corner of that house held a piece of my heart. The hallway where she used to play, the window where she laughed, the garden where I used to imagine her running as a little girl. I wanted to take those memories with me, but they belonged to another life. I had to let them go. As I reached the door, she called out my name one last time, her voice breaking completely. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I had looked back, I wouldn't have been able to leave. Outside, the sky was gray, the wind cold. I walked down the long driveway, feeling smaller with every step. The guards at the gate stared at me, confused. They had seen me come in months ago as a poor old servant. Now, I was leaving as the owner of a truth no one could erase. My feet ached, my eyes burned, but I kept walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay where I had been forgotten. Behind me, I could still hear her crying. That sound followed me all the way down the road. It echoed in my ears even after the mansion disappeared behind the trees. I thought about turning back, just once, to tell her that she was still my daughter, that I didn't want her guilt, just her peace. But some words are better left unsaid. Sometimes, silence is the only punishment life gives, and the only mercy too. As I reached the end of the road, I looked up at the sky and whispered to her mother, "I did my best." The wind blew softly, almost like an answer. My heart hurt, but there was peace in that pain. I had lost her once when she left home, and I lost her again when she finally remembered me. Love brought me back to her door, but pride took me away again. She had her wealth, her mansion, her perfect life. I had nothing but the truth, and somehow, that was enough, because now she knew. She knew who I was, what I had done, what I had endured, just to see her one last time. And maybe one day, when the guilt fades and the pride dies, she will remember not the servant she scolded, but the father who loved her too much to stay. I never went back to that house again. After I left, I rented a small room near the old town where we once lived when she was a child. The room was simple: one bed, one chair, one window that looked out onto the street. I didn't have much, but I had peace. Every morning, I would wake up and sit by that window, watching people pass by, mothers holding their children's hands, fathers carrying groceries, families walking together. It reminded me of what I had lost, but also of what I once had. Sometimes pain doesn't come from what's taken away. It comes from remembering how full your heart used to be. Days turned into weeks. The first few mornings, I expected her to come. I thought maybe she'd drive down, stand at my door, call out for me like she used to when she was little. But no one came. I wasn't angry. I knew she needed time. Guilt is a heavy thing. It keeps a person quiet longer than hate ever can. I didn't want her to come out of guilt. I wanted her to come out of love, and love can't be forced. So I waited. Quietly. Patiently. The way only a father can. At night, I'd light a candle beside her old photograph. She was about 10 in that picture, wearing the same blue school uniform, smiling proudly with her arm around my neck. I'd whisper to her, even though I knew she couldn't hear me. I'd tell her that I still loved her, that I still prayed for her, that I hoped she was eating well, sleeping well, smiling again. I never cursed her name. I never wished her pain. Because love doesn't stop when someone forgets you. It just learns to live in silence. After some months, I heard from one of the old workers at her house. He came by the market where I bought my food. He recognized me right away and said softly, "Sir, she's changed." I asked what he meant. He said she let go of most of the servants, started visiting charities, and even opened a home for the elderly. "She talks about you sometimes," he said. "Says she's still trying to find you." I didn't answer. My heart wanted to go back to her right then, to tell her I was still alive, still here. But my mind told me not to. Some lessons only stay when they're carried with the weight of loss. Years passed. My hair grew completely white. My hands shook more. But my heart stayed steady. I found small work, fixing shoes for the neighborhood kids, mending clothes for people who couldn't afford new ones. They called me Grandpa and brought me food sometimes. I found comfort in those small kindnesses. I didn't need much. I had already lived a life full of both love and sorrow. One afternoon, as I was closing my little shop, a car stopped nearby. A young woman stepped out holding flowers. I didn't recognize her at first. She wore simple clothes, no jewelry, no makeup. But then she smiled, and I saw it. My daughter's smile. My eyes filled instantly. She walked toward me slowly, tears in her eyes, and said, "Papa." Her voice broke when she said it, like the word had been waiting years to be spoken again. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the face that had once looked at me with pride, then anger, and now, love. She kneeled in front of me, just like she had on the day I left, and placed the flowers in my hands. "I found you. she said softly. I couldn't speak. I just touched her face gently, tracing the same cheek I once wiped tears from when she was small. She was crying again, but these tears were different. They weren't from guilt or shame. They were from love, from realization, from finally understanding what family means. We sat there for a long time, not saying much. She told me she sold the mansion, said she didn't need all that anymore, said she wanted to build something smaller, a home with warmth instead of walls. I listened quietly. My heart felt light again for the first time in years. Before she left, she hugged me tight, really tight, the way she used to as a child. I could feel her heartbeat against my chest, steady and real. I love you, Papa, she whispered. I closed my eyes and whispered back, I know. When she drove away, I didn't cry. I smiled. The world had turned full circle. Life had broken us apart, but love had found a way to bring us back together. The servant she once ignored had always been her father, and the father she had lost had always been waiting, quietly, with open arms. Sometimes life teaches through pain what comfort never could. And though I spent months cleaning her floors and hiding my name, I left her house with something no one could ever take away. Her heart, finally remembering mine.